It's stunning how the universe delivers information to you exactly when you need it, even when you never wanted to know. For me, it was a receipt. A single piece of paper that shattered 23 years of marriage in less than 23 seconds. I remember staring at that commercial lease agreement that had accidentally been delivered to our home mailbox instead of his office. The property address wasn't familiar. The business name, Aurora Boutique, wasn't one I recognized from my husband's portfolio of commercial investments. But the signature, that signature I knew by heart. I still remember how my coffee mug trembled in my hand as I read the details. The tenant's name jumped off the page and slapped me across the face. Gabriela Martinez, the woman my husband had introduced as his marketing consultant at last year's company Christmas party. The woman who'd called our home more times than seemed professional. The woman whose perfume sometimes lingered on his suits when he came home late. I didn't scream. I didn't throw things. Something inside me went terrifyingly still. Richard has always been generous, I whispered to my empty kitchen. Just not with me. The initial shock quickly crystallized into something harder, colder. The lease was for a prime retail location in the downtown shopping district, a location other business owners would kill for. The terms were absurdly favorable. 3 years with a 5-year renewal option, rent at 40% below market value, and a $250,000 tenant improvement allowance that was essentially a gift. My husband hadn't just been unfaithful, he'd been investing in his infidelity. I sat there until the sunlight shifted across our marble countertops, the same countertops I'd spent weeks selecting when we renovated our home 5 years ago. I'd poured my soul into building this life, this family, this legacy. Meanwhile, Richard had been building something else entirely. That evening, when he came home, I performed the same routine I'd perfected over 2 decades. Dinner was waiting. I asked about his day. I smiled at all the right moments. But inside, I was calculating, measuring, assessing everything I'd given and everything I'd lost. "You seem distracted," Richard said, loosening his tie. "Everything okay?" "Just thinking about new beginnings," I replied, pouring him another glass of wine. "New beginnings?" He looked confused, almost concerned. "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "People are always starting fresh, aren't they? New businesses, new relationships, new lives." He nodded, clearly relieved I wasn't asking about his day in any detail. "That's the beauty of life, isn't it? Constant renewal." I smiled. "Speaking of which, I heard there's a new boutique opening downtown next month. Aurora something?" The wine glass froze halfway to his lips. A flash of panic crossed his face before he recovered. "Oh? I hadn't heard." That's when I knew with absolute certainty. 23 years of marriage had taught me to read every micro-expression on his face. The slight tightening around his eyes, the momentary stillness of his breathing, the calculated casualness that followed. "Might be worth checking out," I continued, heart pounding behind my composed exterior. "I heard the owner got an incredible deal on the property. Someone with deep pockets must really believe in her." Richard coughed, reaching for his water. "Well, good for her. We need more entrepreneurs these days." I nodded, letting the subject drop. But something had changed in that moment. A switch had flipped inside me. The loyal, trusting wife who had entered the kitchen that morning no longer existed. In her place stood someone new, someone calculating, someone with nothing left to lose. The next morning, I made an appointment with the most ruthless divorce attorney in the city. Not to file, not yet, but to understand my options, to prepare. "Mrs. Montgomery," the attorney said, reviewing our finances, "your husband has been quite creative with some of his recent investments." "Creative how?" I asked, though I already knew. "He's been channeling significant company resources through subsidiary entities. One, in particular, has been the recipient of substantial capital recently." "Let me guess," I said. "For a boutique?" The attorney looked impressed. "You've done your homework." "Not enough," I replied, "but I'm a quick study." That's when I learned the grand opening for Aurora Boutique was scheduled for the following month. Invitations had gone out to the city's elite, a ribbon-cutting ceremony with the mayor, champagne, press coverage. My husband had spared no expense for his mistress's debut as a self-made businesswoman. "So what would you like to do?" the attorney asked. I smiled for the first time in days. "I'd like to RSVP to this grand opening, but I think I'll arrive a little early." The weeks that followed were an education in betrayal. Like archaeologists unearthing an ancient civilization, my attorney and I excavated the layers of Richard's deception. Each discovery was another knife to the heart. "Your husband established a shell company to purchase the property 2 years ago," my attorney explained, spreading documents across his desk. "He then leased it to Ms. Martinez at well below market value. The tenant improvements alone cost over $300,000. 2 years?" I repeated, the words bitter on my tongue, while I was caring for his mother through chemo. My mind traveled back to those months of hospital visits, of sleeping in uncomfortable chairs, of holding my mother-in-law's hand as she battled cancer. Richard had been conspicuously absent, always tied up with work. Now I understood what, or who, had been tying him up. "There's more," the attorney continued. "The inventory for the boutique was purchased through another subsidiary. Designer clothes, accessories, jewelry, close to $500,000. I laughed hollowly. "Last Christmas, he told me we needed to tighten our belts when I wanted to donate to the children's hospital." The worst discovery came when my attorney hired a private investigator. The PI returned with photos. Richard and Gabriella looking at properties together, dining at restaurants where he'd never taken me, entering the boutique after hours. There were images of them selecting fixtures, choosing inventory, planning their future, her future, with my family's money. One photo showed them embracing in front of the store, champagne glasses in hand, toasting to Aurora Boutique. The name suddenly made horrible sense. Aurora was Richard's mother's name, the mother I had cared for through her final illness while he was building a shrine to her memory with his mistress. "He named it after his mother," I whispered, the ultimate betrayal washing over me. "Mrs. Montgomery?" My attorney looked concerned. "I'm fine," I lied. "Please continue." The financial trail was comprehensive. Richard had diverted nearly $2 million from our joint assets and his business to fund this boutique. Money that should have been for our retirement, for our children's futures, for our life together. At home, I performed my role flawlessly. I maintained our social calendar, hosted his business associates for dinner, smiled at the right moments. Richard noticed nothing amiss. Or perhaps he didn't want to notice. "You seem happier lately," he commented one evening as we prepared for bed. "Do I?" I kept my voice light. "Yes, you've got a certain glow." He kissed my cheek, a perfunctory gesture we'd exchanged thousands of times. "I guess I've just gained some clarity recently." "About what?" I looked him directly in the eyes. "About what I deserve." He smiled, misunderstanding completely. "You deserve the world, darling." "Yes," I agreed. "I do." The grand opening invitations arrived the following week. Not to our home, of course, but to Richard's office. I wouldn't have known about it if not for our neighbor, a city council member who'd received one. "Will you be attending Aurora's opening?" she asked innocently over our fence. Richard must be so proud to be investing in female entrepreneurs. I maintained my composure somehow. "Oh yes, he's always had an eye for promising ventures." That night, Richard announced he would be traveling for business the weekend of the opening. "Important client meetings in Chicago," he explained, not meeting my eyes. "Can't be helped." "That's a shame," I replied. "You'll miss the Aurora Boutique opening. Everyone's talking about it." His head snapped up. "You know about that?" I shrugged. "Small town. People talk." "It's just a small investment," he said carefully. "One of many." "Of course," I nodded. "Though from what I hear, it's quite impressive. The owner must be very persuasive." He cleared his throat. "It's strictly business, Samantha." "Isn't it always?" I smiled, watching him squirm. That night, after Richard fell asleep, I slipped out of bed and went to my home office. I sent an email to my attorney. "I'm ready to move forward. Let's discuss the grand opening strategy." The response came within minutes despite the late hour. "My team is standing by. Are you sure you want to do it this publicly?" I stared at my sleeping husband, this stranger I'd shared my life with for over 2 decades, the man who had held my hand through 2 difficult childbirths, who had danced with me at our 20th anniversary party, who had stood beside me at his mother's funeral, all while building a secret life with another woman. I gave everything to him, I whispered to myself, and he discarded me like nothing. I typed my response. The more public, the better. She's stolen enough from me in private. The grand opening was scheduled for Saturday at 11 a.m., with a VIP preview starting at 10. Richard had left for his Chicago meetings on Friday morning with an overnight bag and a distracted kiss goodbye. I watched him drive away, knowing exactly where he was actually going. Be safe, I called after him. He had no idea how much I meant it. My attorney arrived at my home an hour later, accompanied by a forensic accountant, a private investigator, and a digital security expert. We commandeered the dining room, spreading documents across the table where Richard and I had shared thousands of meals. We've compiled everything, my attorney said. The financial records, the property transactions, the shell companies. It's all here. The forensic accountant nodded. He wasn't as clever as he thought. There's a clear paper trail connecting him to every penny spent on that boutique. What about digital evidence? I asked. The security expert opened her laptop. We've recovered deleted emails, text messages, and calendar entries going back 3 years. He used the same password for everything. Your anniversary date, ironically. I laughed without humor. At least he remembered it for something. The private investigator added, We have surveillance footage of them together at the property at least 30 times in the past year, often after hours, sometimes overnight. I took a deep breath. And the legal implications? My attorney looked grim but satisfied. He used marital assets and company funds to finance his affair. That's not just morally reprehensible, it's legally actionable. We have enough for fraud charges if you want to pursue that route. Not yet, I said. First, the opening. We spent hours refining the plan. Timing would be crucial. We needed to arrive before the VIP preview, but after Richard and Gabriella were already there. We needed witnesses, but the right kind of witnesses. We needed evidence that couldn't be disputed or explained away. What about our children? I asked suddenly. They're both in college out of state, the PI reminded me gently. But we should prepare for them to hear about this. News travels fast. I nodded. I'll call them tomorrow evening after it's done. They deserve to hear it from me first. What my team didn't know was that I had already spoken to both my children. Not about the affair or the boutique specifically, but about integrity, about partnership, about respect. They were adults now, capable of understanding that sometimes good people make devastating choices. They knew their father and I had been struggling, though they didn't know why. They would be hurt, but they would understand. There's something else, I said, reaching for my personal laptop. Something I never told Richard. I opened a folder labeled Family Business and turned the screen toward them. Before we married, I worked in commercial real estate development. I left to raise our children, but I never stopped watching the market. The folder contained meticulous records of properties throughout the city, including the building where Aurora Boutique was located. I knew Richard bought that building 2 years ago. What he doesn't know is that I own the building next door. I purchased it through my family's trust last year when it came on the market. My attorney's eyes widened. You knew about the affair all this time? No, I admitted. I just knew it was a good investment. The universe works in mysterious ways. This was my secret strength. While Richard had been building his deception, I had been quietly building security for myself. The modest inheritance from my parents hadn't gone into our joint accounts as Richard believed. Instead, I'd invested it independently, creating a safety net I hoped I'd never need. So what does this property give us? The attorney asked. Access, I replied. There's a connecting door between the buildings in the back hallway, a remnant from when they were a single business decades ago. The maintenance staff for my building has keys. The PI whistled. That's how we'll get in early. Exactly. The final piece of my plan involved the guests. I had obtained the invitation list through my neighbor on the city council. Every important person in town would be there. The mayor, business leaders, socialites, local celebrities, people whose opinion Richard valued. People whose gossip could destroy reputations. I've made some calls, I said. Several key guests have agreed to arrive early at my request. Old friends who know nothing about what's happening but trust me enough to show up. This is going to be quite a show, my attorney observed. Not a show, I corrected. Justice. That night, alone in the house Richard and I had built together, I finally allowed myself to cry. Not from sadness, but from determination. I wasn't just fighting for my financial security or my pride. I was fighting for every moment I'd invested in a marriage that had meant everything to me, and apparently nothing to him. I packed a small bag with what I would need for the next day. A cream-colored Chanel suit Richard had given me for our last anniversary, my grandmother's pearls, and a folder containing selected documents, just enough to make my point without revealing our full legal strategy. One more thing, I whispered to myself, opening our safe. Inside was a small velvet box containing the diamond earrings Richard had given me when our first child was born. I had never told him that one of the stones had been loose for years. I'd noticed but kept wearing them anyway, terrified of losing even a piece of what we had built together. The irony wasn't lost on me. The morning of the grand opening dawned crisp and clear, a perfect day for new beginnings. I dressed carefully, the Chanel suit, the pearls, subtle makeup that highlighted my eyes. I wanted to look exactly like the woman Richard had married, the woman he had betrayed, the woman who was about to reclaim her dignity. My attorney picked me up at 9:15. Ready? I've been ready for longer than I realized, I replied. We drove downtown in silence. Through the window, I watched families going about their Saturday mornings, people who had no idea they were about to witness the implosion of what appeared to be a perfect marriage. We parked behind my building at 9:30. The maintenance manager was waiting as promised, keys in hand. Morning, Mrs. Montgomery. Everything's set up like you asked. Thank you, Jim. I appreciate your discretion. We entered through the service entrance and made our way to the connecting door. Beyond it lay the back hallway of Aurora Boutique, and the sounds of my husband's voice mingled with a woman's laughter. They're here early, my attorney whispered. Of course they are, I replied. They wanted private time before the charade begins. I took a deep breath and nodded to Jim, who unlocked the connecting door. We stepped through silently into the pristine back hallway of the boutique. Everything was new. Fresh paint, gleaming fixtures, elegant signage. No expense had been spared. From the main showroom came the sound of champagne corks popping and Richard's voice. To us, to Aurora, to new beginnings. Should we wait for the guests? My attorney whispered. I checked my watch. The mayor and the others I invited will be here in 10 minutes. Let's get the lay of the land. We moved silently through the hallway toward the main showroom, stopping just short of the entrance. From our vantage point, we could see everything. Richard in his best suit with his arm around Gabriella, both holding champagne flutes. The boutique was stunning. Custom fixtures, designer clothing, a champagne bar, flowers everywhere. A large portrait of Richard's mother, Aurora, hung prominently on the back wall. Quite the investment, my attorney murmured. Quite the theft, I corrected. Just then, the front door chimed. Richard jumped, separating from Gabriella as the mayor and several city council members entered, all arriving early at my request. Mr. Montgomery, the mayor called out. I thought we were early. Richard recovered quickly. Mayor Collins, yes, just doing a final check before the festivities. More guests began arriving, all the early arrivals I had orchestrated. Richard looked increasingly confused as people he hadn't expected for another half hour filled the boutique. I think it's time, I said. My attorney nodded, and we stepped out of the shadows and into the showroom. The moment Richard saw me, all color drained from his face. Samantha? What are you... I thought that I was at home, that I didn't know. I kept my voice steady, my posture straight. Or that I wouldn't find out you've stolen $2 million from our family to set up your mistress in business. The room went deadly silent. Gabriella froze, champagne glass halfway to her lips. This isn't what it looks like, Richard started, but I cut him off. It's exactly what it looks like, Richard. Aurora Boutique, named after your mother, the woman I nursed through cancer while you were out selecting designer handbags with Ms. Martinez. I turned to the shocked guests. I apologize for the unconventional welcome to this grand opening, but I thought you should know what you're really celebrating today. Not female entrepreneurship or downtown development, but fraud, infidelity, and theft. My attorney stepped forward, opening his briefcase. Mr. Montgomery, these are financial records showing the diversion of marital assets and company funds to finance this business venture. We have copies for everyone here, including the district attorney, who should be arriving shortly. Richard's face contorted with rage and fear. You had no right to go through my business records. Actually, as your wife and as a 40% shareholder in your company, I had every right. I replied calmly. Just as I had every right to know you were sleeping with your marketing consultant while I was building our life. Gabriella finally found her voice. Richard, do something. He turned on her instantly. Shut up. Just shut up for a minute. The mask had slipped. This wasn't the charming, controlled Richard everyone knew. This was the real man beneath. I addressed the stunned crowd again. I'm not here to create a scene. I'm here to set the record straight. This business was not built on hard work and entrepreneurial spirit. It was built on stolen money and lies. And while Ms. Martinez may model these beautiful clothes beautifully, she should know that everything here legally belongs to me and Richard's legitimate business partners. Richard moved toward me, lowering his voice. Samantha, please. We can discuss this privately. There's no need to... To what? To tell the truth? I've spent 23 years being the perfect wife, Richard. I've hosted your clients, raised your children, supported your dreams, nursed your mother. And how did you repay that loyalty? By stealing from our future to finance your affair. The mayor stepped forward awkwardly. Perhaps we should give you folks some privacy. No need, Mayor Collins, I said. My business here is concluded. I handed him a folder. These are the property records showing that Mr. Montgomery used fraudulent means to purchase this building. As the city's chief executive, you might find it relevant. I turned back to Richard and Gabriella. The district attorney has copies of everything. So does the IRS. The boutique is being shut down pending investigation. All assets are frozen as of 20 minutes ago, when my attorney filed the emergency injunction. You can't do this, Gabriella cried. I already have, I replied, finally allowing myself to look directly at the woman who had been my husband's partner in betrayal. She wasn't what I expected, not a caricature of a homewrecker, but a human being who had made terrible choices, just as my husband had. Richard, I said, turning back to him, your things will be packed and waiting with security at the house. The locks have been changed. Your lawyer will be hearing from mine on Monday. As I turned to leave, Richard grabbed my arm. You'll regret this, Samantha. You're nothing without me. I smiled for the first time that day. That's where you're wrong, Richard. I was everything with you, despite you. Imagine what I'll be without you. The gathered crowd parted as my attorney and I walked toward the door. Just before exiting, I turned back to face the boutique, the beautiful space Richard had created for another woman with my family's money. Oh, and Gabriella. The rent on this place is actually due today. Market rate is triple what Richard was charging you. I expect a check by noon, or the eviction process begins tomorrow. 1 year later, I stood in front of Aurora Boutique, though it wasn't called that anymore. The elegant signage now read, Phoenix Rising, a women's business incubator I had founded with the settlement money from my divorce. The divorce had been swift and devastating for Richard. With the evidence of financial fraud, the courts had been unmerciful. He'd lost his company, most of his assets, and what remained of his reputation. Last I heard, he'd moved to Florida to restart his life with significantly reduced circumstances. Gabriella had faced consequences too, though less severe than Richard's. She'd lost the boutique and had been named as a co-defendant in several fraud cases. However, I'd eventually dropped my personal claims against her after she agreed to participate in a documentary about financial infidelity and its impacts. She wasn't innocent, but she hadn't made vows to me. Richard had. The morning of the grand opening confrontation had become something of a local legend. Video had circulated, of course. In the age of smartphones, how could it not? My children had been hurt and angry, but ultimately supportive. You taught us about self-respect, my daughter had said. How could we be upset when you're finally applying that lesson to yourself? Inside Phoenix Rising, 20 women entrepreneurs were currently developing their business plans, receiving mentorship, and preparing to launch their own ventures, legitimately, ethically, powerfully. Mrs. Montgomery? A young woman approached, portfolio in hand. I just wanted to thank you. Before coming here, I didn't think someone like me could actually start a business. Someone like you is exactly who should be starting businesses, I replied. And please, call me Samantha. Later that evening, I sat on my terrace, watching the sunset with a glass of wine. My phone buzzed with a text from my attorney, now a close friend. Final settlement papers filed today. It's officially over. I took a deep breath. It was strange how little I felt about Richard now. The man I had loved for more than half my life had become a distant memory. A lesson learned. A chapter closed. My doorbell rang. It was my neighbor, the city council member who had inadvertently set everything in motion by mentioning the boutique opening. Just checking in, she said, joining me on the terrace. Big day with those final papers. It feels anticlimactic, I admitted. All that drama, and in the end, it just ends. That's how it should be, she said wisely. The drama is never the important part. It's what you build afterward that matters. I thought about Phoenix Rising, about the women finding their paths there, about my own journey from betrayed wife to independent businesswoman. I thought about my children, who had witnessed their mother's transformation and were better for it. You know what I realized? I said, refilling our glasses. When Richard said I was nothing without him, he actually believed it. He couldn't imagine me as separate from him, as whole without him. That was the real betrayal. Not the affair, not even the money. It was that after 23 years, he never really saw me at all. My neighbor nodded. And now? I smiled, watching the last rays of sunlight disappear beyond the horizon. Now I see myself clearly, and that's worth everything I lost. The lights of the city began to twinkle below us. Thousands of individual stories playing out in windows and streets and restaurants. Somewhere out there, people were falling in love, breaking apart, starting over, just as I had done. The universe may deliver hard truths exactly when we need them, but it also delivers second chances. My receipt of betrayal had become my ticket to freedom. My husband's boutique for his mistress had transformed into my platform for empowering women. The public humiliation had blossomed into public respect. To new beginnings, I whispered, raising my glass to the night sky. The ones we choose